Advisory. Some episodes of the 1836 podcast are not intended for all audiences, due to details that might be considered disturbing. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nathan Rogers.
This is Joe Batterton.
And this is 1836.
On episode 5 of the 1836 podcast, we talk about the Bandit Queen, Belle Starr.
So, man, I don't really even know where to start. There's a lot to unpack here. We could almost do an episode on everyone we mention on this, but we're going to be talking about Belle Starr.
I'll start this. I'll do just a little snippet here to bring her real close to our area, and then we'll push her back real quick. Henry Starr, correct? The right
yes,
name?
Sir. Yep.
Kind of a famous outlaw in our area that decided to rob a bank over in Harrison, Arkansas in the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. I don't know the date right off the top of my head, but got into a shootout, got killed, and the town people rejoiced because they caught the bad guy. But anyway, the connection. So he was related to Sam Starr, who Belle Starr had eventually married at some point, hence the name. And so, like you just said, Nathan, you could do, and we probably will do, a story on each one of these people that we mentioned that kind of tie her to our area. And I think she probably lived right around Fort Smith, Van Buren area. I know her daughter did later on. But she was always in that northwest Arkansas, southwest Missouri, Oklahoma area. And that was kind of her. I think she was down in Texas a little bit. But, people always think of the Old West as being way out there. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. Fort Smith, hell on the border. Springfield, the first, high noon shootout. That stuff was all happening right here. It wasn't some faraway, distant planet. It was right here in Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and so that was my segue into Belle Starr.
In 1839, John Shirley and his new wife Elizabeth Hatfield relocated to the picturesque Ozarks in southwestern Missouri. There, they staked a claim on 800 acres of land near the Spring River. Elizabeth was John's third wife and was related to the Hatfields of the infamous Hatfield and McCoy family feud. The couple's transition to the Ozarks proved prosperous, and Elizabeth, known as Eliza, embraced her role as a stepmother to John's two children from a previous marriage. In 1842, Eliza gave birth to their first child, a son named John Allison, affectionately called Bud. Shortly after, on February 5, 1848, Myra Maybelle Shirley was born on their farm, followed by another son, Edwin. Myra Maybelle and her brothers formed deep and strong bonds. While her family called her May, she would later become known across the America as Belle. In the 1860s, John Shirley made a pivotal decision to sell their family farm and relocate to Carthage, Missouri. In their new town, he acquired a stable and a blacksmith shop, and then built a hotel and tavern on his lots. Eliza took charge of their tavern, guaranteeing that it served the highest quality food and beverages. She also enforced strict rules to prevent rudeness and excessive drunkenness, particularly when women were present. John, on the other hand, amassed an impressive collection of books and became an unofficial advisor to pro-slavery political factions in Missouri. Belle received a formal education and developed talented piano-playing skills. At 7 years old, she became one of the first students at the Carthage Female Academy, a school her father had a hand in establishing. Her exceptional intelligence and rapid learning set her apart. But by the age of 10, Belle had already earned a reputation among her peers. Belle was known for her fierce and fearless nature, unafraid to confront anyone, regardless of their gender. Despite her fiery temper, she showed a spirited demeanor and excelled in both music and horsemanship. Her early years were filled with exciting adventures, most often alongside her daring brother, Bud. Under Bud's tutelage, Belle honed her skills as a sharpshooter and hunter, quickly becoming an excellent marksman. Bud Shirley played an active role in the Ozarks during the tumultuous American Civil War era. As tensions between the North and South escalated, the Ozarks found themselves divided among Union supporters, Confederate sympathizers, and those hoping to remain neutral. When William Quantrill arrived in the Ozarks, Seeking young recruits for his gang, Bud enthusiastically joined. Quantrill's Raiders, a Confederate guerrilla force, included notable figures like Frank and Jesse James, Bloody Bill Anderson, and Cole Younger. Jim Reed, another member of Quantrill's Raiders, arrived in Carthage when Belle was 13. Reed, initially non-violent and religious, became good friends with Bud and later at the age of 17, joined the gang alongside him. Belle developed a crush on Reed and the two allegedly began a secret relationship. At the age of 15, Belle watched her brother Bud depart with the Bushwhackers, and she swore to always help him in any way possible. In February 1863, Belle rode to a mansion in Newtonia, a small Missouri village, under the guise of being lost and seeking shelter for the night. Unbeknownst to the mansion's owner, Belle's Confederate affiliations led her to spend the evening with a dozen Union officers who were guests at the mansion. Throughout the evening, she dined and played the piano for them. The next morning, she asked to break off a cherry branch, to use as a switch for her horse as she departed. Little did the mansion's owner know, the broken cherry branch served as a signal for Quantrill's Raiders to attack the Union safe house. After Belle's departure, the Raiders launched an assault, causing significant damage to the mansion but injuring no one. Belle returned home, waiting anxiously for news of her brother Bud, who had risen to the rank of captain within Quantrill's Raiders and had become a close friend of the group's founder. While there's no concrete evidence that Belle ever encountered Quantrill himself, she certainly formed acquaintances with the likes of the James and Younger brothers. By June 1864, Bud's reputation as a Confederate bushwhacker made him a target for Union forces. He and a comrade were discovered by troops from the 3rd Wisconsin Cavalry while dining at a home in Jasper County. As the Union soldiers quietly surrounded the house during lunchtime, Bud and his friend attempted to flee. Bud was shot as he leapt over a fence, losing his life on the other side. Upon learning of her brother's death, 16-year-old Belle vowed to avenge him through any means possible. From this point onward, Belle seemed to develop extreme loyalty to the rebellious men in her life, who constantly defied authority, and more often than not, she played a role in helping them evade capture.
Her parents moved to the Ozarks in 1839. She was actually born Myra May Belle Shirley. Her parents called her May, and of course later on she was called Belle. But her mother was Eliza Hatfield, and if that name sounds familiar, yep, she was related to those Hatfields.
Tied to the Hatfields and the McCoys, yeah.
Her parents, John and Elizabeth, they moved to the Ozarks, did quite well for themselves, moved to Carthage, Missouri after a while, started a stable and a hotel and saloon. Eliza kind of ran the tavern. She made sure everybody behaved themselves. And John got mixed up in some politics and really got involved in the pro-slavery factions of Missouri.
So this is all mid 1800s, right?
Yes.
Pre-Civil War, when all this stuff started to really, when they were settling in that Carthage area. And Carthage was kind of a Confederate hotspot.
Yeah.
That was Missouri's I think it was one of the pro-South areas, and so a lot of stuff going on there. Obviously, if anybody's familiar with Arkansas Civil War history, the Battle of Carthage, and a lot of that stuff that went on around there, the James and Younger gang, and all that Quantrill stuff. That was, that stuff all. It took place all over Missouri and northern Arkansas, but Carthage and Joplin, those areas, I think they all were kind of central to a lot of those stories.
She was born in 1848. She had a couple brothers. She had some stepbrothers, but she was very close to her brother Bud.
Were they from the history you read, were they a rough and tumble family? I know that the mom was related to the Hatfields, but I mean they were kind of a civilized family, right?
Yeah, they really wasn't. Her dad
was a businessman.
A businessman.
They were looking to better themselves.
He helped establish an all-girls school in Carthage. In fact, Belle went there. She got a formal education. She was musically talented. Her parents were well off. Her brother Bud, like I said, very close to him, probably her best friend.
What happened to her, Nathan? What caused this good girl from a good family?
Quantrill earlier, he came to Carthage looking for some folks, and Bud joined up at the age of, I think, 17. And then, before you knew it.
Why, Bud? Why did you do this?
Bud became a bushwhacker. He
oh no.
He helped train Belle, shoot guns, hunt, ride horses, all that. She's kind of a tomboy. Through this, she met a gentleman by the name of Jim Reed, and we'll touch on him later. Kind of had a crush on Jim when she was 13. He was a couple years older than her. He became buddies with Bud, and her and Jim kind of had a secret relationship. When she was 15, she said she was going to help, Bud any way she could, even though he was with Quantrell's Raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson, Frank James, Jesse James, Cole Younger.
I know where this is going. I've heard this story.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
So they sent Belle to a place in Newtonia.
I've been to Newtonia. There were federal troops holed up in a house there, correct?
But we're pretty much a safe house. The guy who owned a mansion was protecting them pretty much.
So they were staying in this house, and the boys sent Belle in there is a kind of an alarm system. If they showed up or if they're going to move, she was to create some kind of chaos and then warn them that this is all going to happen, right? Something like that.
Yeah, she ended up staying the night with them, acting like she was her best friend, acting like she had gotten lost.
Playing the piano and singing songs.
Playing the piano for them all night long. And the next morning, like you said, there was a signal. She asked the gentleman who owned the mansion, "Can I break off this cherry branch and use it for a switch so I can get home, with my horse?" And sure, no problem. When she broke off that branch, that was a sign that it was good for them to attack. And when she left, Quantrell's Raiders attacked this mansion, shot it all to pieces where it was pretty much unusable, but nobody got hurt. That's kind of the crazy thing. Kind of a waste of bullets there. Bud ends up getting killed. Him and a buddy was eating lunch one day, and some Union folks, he's kind of getting a reputation of being a well-known bushwhacker, and they surround the place he was eating. He bolts out, jumps over a fence, and he was dead before he hit the other side. They shot him.
He got his bushwhacked.
And that's what sent Belle over the edge, I believe.
Yeah. I get that. It's like you said, it's your brother, and this war, you read it all the time, brother against brother, father against son, cousin against cousin. It was not Nazi Germany or Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. These were your neighbors. These are people the next town over, even sometimes in your own community, and it's just tragedy. And it's close to home, and I think people get to thinking that nothing was going to happen to them, and all of a sudden these bad things started happening, and then somebody like her who was young and impressionable, and this is the brother who was teaching her things and was keeping her under his wing, and showing her how to ride horses and how to take care of herself, basically. And all of a sudden, he's taken away from her through all this tragedy that's going on around the country, and she just lost it. Yeah,
there's really no evidence that she ever met Quantrell himself, but she for sure met Jesse and Frank James and the younger boys. The South tried to take over this part of Missouri again, and the Union troops ran them out. And for some reason, the Confederates thought it would be a good idea just to burn the whole town down. Like if they're not going to use it.
If we can't have it, nobody's going to have it.
So they burnt their own town down, basically, which included the Shirley's motel, saloon, everything they'd worked for. And John made the decision he's ready to get out of Dodge, and they headed to Texas.
On September 19, 1864, nearly 12,000 Confederate cavalrymen entered southeast Missouri aimed at reclaiming the state for the Confederacy. However, their ambitious endeavor ultimately failed, and Federal forces repelled their advance. 3 days later, the residents of Carthage hastily packed their belongings and joined the exodus from the town. In the days that followed, Confederate forces set fire to the entire town, reducing it to smoldering ruins to prevent the Federal government from utilizing it. The town was reduced to scorched rubble, with only stone chimneys standing as grim reminders of the homes and businesses that once thrived there. Among the ruins lay the remains of John Shirley's hotel, blacksmith shop, and stable. The Shirley family, deeply distressed by the loss of Bud and the destruction of their livelihood, made the difficult decision to leave Missouri behind. John Shirley loaded his family and their possessions into 2 wagons, embarking on a journey to Scion, Texas, a small settlement about 10 miles southeast of modern-day Dallas. Preston, his son, and other Missourians had already settled in there, and there was still available land. In Scion, John Shirley constructed a 4-room house that attracted the admiration of the entire town. He also made an attempt to establish a new hotel. Belle initially enrolled in a 1-room school nearby, but her attendance was short-lived. She was older than most of her peers and had already surpassed them academically. More often than not, she found herself assisting with household chores and caring for her younger siblings. Then, in the winter of 1866, news from afar reached Sion. Tales of certain individuals who had ridden with Quantrill's raiders during the war began to circulate. On a cold February morning, a dozen armed men descended upon Liberty, Missouri, and perpetrated a brazen heist. They robbed the Clay County Savings Association, making off with a substantial sum of $15,000 in gold coins, silver, and greenbacks, along with $45,000 in U.S. bonds. Tragically, they also killed a young man who had attempted to raise the alarm in the town. This marked the beginning of a series of bank and train robberies and attributed to the soon-to-be infamous gang led by Frank and Jesse James, as well as Cole Younger and his brothers. Some of the robbers journeyed to Texas to convert the gold and silver into currency before returning north in July 1866. During their return trip, Jesse James and the Younger brothers spent at least one night at the Shirley residence in Sion. This brief visit gave rise to a long-standing rumors suggesting that Belle became pregnant and gave birth to Cole Younger's child 9 months later. In reality, Belle had rekindled her relationship with Jim Reed, her childhood crush, whose family had also relocated to Texas. Reed, while a disenfranchised bushwhacker, was not yet a wanted man, and Belle married him on November 1, 1866, before returning to Missouri with him in 1867. In early September 1868, Belle gave birth to a baby girl, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though she might be willing to leave behind the anger and turmoil stemming from her brother Bud's killing. Perhaps she considered embracing a life of domestic happiness. However, several events over the next few years would set her on a different course, leading her away from that tranquil path.
This is the beginning of Belle.
This is kind of when she went off
going
the
over
edge.
to the dark side.
She was not happy that her brother, again very close, best friend, blood brother, was killed by Union troops, and she had made a vow pretty much that she was going to do whatever she could to avenge his death.
So that takes them. This is right during the Civil War, right after.
This is right during. They go on down to Texas to a place called Sion or Cyan, something like that. It's a little south of Dallas, modern day Dallas. And then they got news back that some of Quantrill's raiders, where Frank and Jesse James and the Cole Younger gang, robbed a bank in Missouri, and they killed one of the guy that was trying to warn the town folks that was robbing the bank. They ended up killing him. They got away with quite a bit of money, and they fled to Texas. And when they got to Texas, they hooked up with Belle's family and stayed a little bit, moved on. That's also a reoccurring thing throughout her story. She always took outlaws in, helped them out when they were on the run. There was a rumor after they had left, she had a baby 9 months later. There was a rumor that it was Cole Younger's, when in fact it belonged to her buddy Jim Reed that she had a crush on when she was 13 years old. Coincidentally,
How you know that?
Coincidentally, his family moved down there, and what are the odds of that? I guess it could be fairly high if everybody in Carthage.
This is just rumor and innuendo. You're trying to give her a bad reputation.
It would be, but she married him. She married Jim Reed, and him and her moved back to Missouri in 1867, and they had a daughter. 1868. Looked like she was about to settle down, and then her other brother gets killed. He got shot by a lawman in Dallas. I'm not sure why. I think he had a little reputation of getting rowdy, drunk and rowdy. Not a good combination in Texas. And then Jim kind of went on a spree. He got tired of being a farmer and decided he wanted to be a gambler, and spent a lot of time in Fort Smith. There were some horse races, and pretty much lost all their money.
Another impactful moment of Belle's life happened when her other brother, Edwin, was killed by lawmen in Dallas, Texas. While the exact reason remains uncertain, rumors circulated that Edwin had an itch for picking fights and recklessly firing his gun in public, a behavior not uncommon in that era, especially among Texas cowboys after long trail drives. This incident left Belle despondent, but she had little time for mourning as she was caring for her newborn while her husband, Jim Reed, provided little help. Reed's absence from home grew more frequent as he developed a taste for gambling in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Soon, Reed became entangled in a life of crime, occasionally riding with the James Younger gang or at least being influenced by their activities. However, Reed's criminal record soon extended beyond this affiliation. He killed a man in Arkansas and faced accusations of illegally transporting whiskey into Indian Territory, modern-day Oklahoma. With Reed's crimes accumulating, Belle, Jim, and their daughter fled all the way to Los Angeles, California. Reed reportedly made his living as a gambler, and Belle gave birth to another child, a boy named Eddie in honor of her late brother. However, Jim Reed's criminal behavior continued to escalate. In November 1873, Reed and 2 other men tortured, killed and robbed a wealthy farmer of around $30,000 while he was in bed. Now wanted in both Texas and Arkansas, Belle rejoined Reed after the incident while he continued to hide from the authorities. In April 1874, Reed and 2 accomplices staged a daring stagecoach robbery approximately 25 miles north of Austin, Texas. Stagecoach robberies were still relatively uncommon at the time, and the heist captured significant attention, leading to a $7,000 reward for Reed's capture. Lawmen and bounty hunters relentlessly pursued him. Finally, on August 6, 1874, Jim Reed's fugitive days came to an end when he was captured by John Morris, a marshal from Arkansas. Reed resisted arrest and turned his gun on Morris, who responded by shooting and killing him. Despite the substantial sums of money her husband had stolen, none of it reached their household, as Reed had squandered most of it through gambling. Belle's father had also passed away, and her own farm had been sorely neglected, producing nothing. By 1875, Belle found herself in a dire situation, both destitute and desperate. Allegedly, she had a romantic involvement with Bruce Younger, a cousin of Cole Younger, and possibly lived off some of his ill-gotten gains. This relationship appears to have ended by 1879. For much of her adult life, Belle drifted in and out of hot, dusty, contested lands in Arkansas, Missouri, Texas, and Indian Territory. At this juncture, Belle turned to a family she had encountered through her late husband, the Starr family. The Starr family were Cherokee and resided in Indian Territory, near present-day Muskogee, Oklahoma, approximately 60 miles west of Fort Smith, Arkansas. Tom Starr, the patriarch of the family, engaged in brisk post-war businesses involving whiskey, cattle, and horse theft. Former bushwhackers and other outlaws found Tom Starr's residence a secure refuge. Cole Younger used Tom's ranch so frequently that the bend in the river near his house became known as Younger's Bend. Tom Starr was the father of 8 sons, one of whom was named Sam. Belle and Sam married in the Cherokee Nation on June 5, 1880, with Sam being 23 years old, while Belle claimed to be 27, although her actual age was 32. Her marriage to Samuel Starr marked the true beginning of her life as a criminal, a path from which there was no turning back.
Something tells me that in the mid to late 1800s, Fort Smith was not a real healthy place to be.
No, and she ends up there too quite often. They ended up leaving for California for a while, went all the way to L.A., and then he came back. He was wanted and ended up being wanted in Texas and Arkansas for murder, and she stood by him all the way. They came back. He ends up getting killed. The marshals go to arrest him, and he made the wrong move, and it was over for him. But then, she ended up marrying Samuel Starr. We briefly talked about his family, and of course, the Starr family, they were well known in the Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma.
They were Cherokee, right?
Mm-hmm. They'd run in whiskey and a part of all kinds of stuff, but the government and the U.S. lawmen would rarely go over there because they were Cherokee and they stayed on Cherokee land, and so that's kind of their hideout.
These guys were known also for. It's probably where she got her start in kind of giving sanctuary to bad men. I mean, the way I understand, the Starrs were friends with the Youngers and the Jameses, and a piece of land that they had out there on the river there. It was actually, I believe it's still to this day, is called Younger Bend.
Yeah,
because that's where they hung out, right? They camped when they were hiding out, right?
Yeah. She was so tied in with Jesse and Frank James and the Youngers, like you said, even from when she lived at home with her dad. after she married Sam Starr. She was still had, connections with them. She'd still hide them out. And they called that bend in the river where they lived, Younger's Bend. The Younger stayed there so much and hid out. All right, Joe, you got a Ozarkism for us for this episode?
Yes, directly. I'll tell you what it is directly.
Tell our
directly would be it.
Yeah, exactly. Tell our
soon,
audience what directly means.
Yeah, soon. Here in the near future, we'll be doing it directly. We'll be doing another episode directly.
I'll keep tuning in to us and giving us some good input, sharing us and all that stuff. We're on YouTube and Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all those places. So we thank you all for keep on listening to us and checking us out. All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in.
See you next time.
Catch you next time.
On the next episode of the 1836 podcast, we continue the story of the Bandit Queen, Belle Starr. Her run-ins with the hanging Judge Isaac Parker and U.S. Marshal Bass Reeves, and her mysterious, unsolved murder. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to this episode of the 1836 podcast. We hope you found it informative and engaging. Please like, share, rate, and review. Leaving a good rating and review on your preferred podcast platform would also help us reach a wider audience. Be sure to tune in next time for another episode, as we continue to explore and uncover the roots and branches of Arkansas, and the fascinating history of the Ozarks.